Welcome to the channel. Today, we're exploring some unbelievable story. Stay tuned and let's dive in. My life looked to be perfectly planned, with little space for unanticipated deviations. I had a stable career as executive editor of a well-known newspaper, which I devoted my life to, while my wife, Emily Carter, prospered as a senior vice president at her publishing business. We had built what seemed to be a perfect life together, a good marriage, 2 college-age children, and financial security. On the surface, everything appeared perfect. However, underneath this polished exterior, fissures were starting to emerge, subtle symptoms that I failed to see until too late. What lied ahead would shatter everything I thought I knew, tearing apart the life I'd fought so hard to create and forcing me to confront terrible truths about love, trust, and vulnerability. My name is Michael Reed, and I am married to Samantha Hayes. My life had revolved on my job as executive editor of the New York Times, while Samantha succeeded as a senior vice president at Lexington Publishing. We have 2 children, Daniel Reed, 22, who studies global affairs at Yale University, and Olivia, 20, who attends Harvard University. Both of us had established good jobs, with Samantha earning significantly more than I did. By all appearances, we were content, or so I thought. We had planned a nice evening together, going to a gala to finish what had been a very difficult week for Samantha. She had been looking forward to the event, and I was excited to see how she relaxed and enjoyed the evening. She donned a lovely new black dress that was strapless and backless, hemmed a few inches above the knee, and had a modest slit that provided just the right amount of curiosity. Her ensemble was completed with the diamond necklace I gave her for our 25th anniversary, her beloved sapphire earrings, and a duplicate of Princess Diana's famous ring. Samantha's golden hair was swept up into an exquisite updo that exuded refinement, and she looked stunning. For my part, I had picked a tuxedo that was both traditional and easy to wear. Samantha was approximately a dozen feet away, leaning comfortably against a mock fireplace with a champagne glass in hand and smiling carefreely like a college student. That portion didn't concern me, it was the guy she was speaking with who had me on edge. He had a slick, self-satisfied smirk and a manner that I instantly detested. His hand remained on her arm and shoulder as he leaned in to murmur something into her ear, and she nodded, her grin firm. That was sufficient. I thought it was time to intervene and remove her from the situation. But as I went forward, a soft hand touched my arm. "Don't do anything," said a calm voice. I turned to find a gorgeous brunette standing behind me. "My wife is getting drawn in by him, and his friends are watching you," she said in a quiet, forceful tone. She gestured softly to a rugged-looking guy approximately 15 feet away, his keen stare fixed on me. Then she pointed to the balcony doors, where another guy was scrutinizing the throng. "He's planning to lead her out to the balcony and make his move," she stated quietly. "He'll likely try to get too close, touch her inappropriately. That's his usual approach. If your wife doesn't respond, he'll move on to someone else. He rarely misses his target." "No offense," she said with somewhat of a shrug. I looked back and saw Samantha still smiling as she followed the guy, Mr. Smooth, to the balcony. They proceeded outside, and I watched his 2 companions gently closing the doors behind them, stationing themselves nearby like sentinels. I looked at the lady next me, who was sipping her whiskey sour with a solemn face. "Who are you?" I inquired, keeping my tone low. "And how do you know all of this?" she said gently. "That was me, 6 years ago." Her remarks astonished and fascinated me, and I listened as she moved me slightly away from the balcony doors, concealing me from Samantha's approach. "My name is Carla," she said, her voice firm but filled with remorse. 7 years ago, I was here at this very gala with my husband, and we were having a great time. We'd even planned to make a sizable donation. Then he approached me. He was charming, magnetic in a way I couldn't explain. Before I knew it, he was touching my back and suggesting we step outside for some air. I was drawn in by his confidence, his charm, and followed him to the balcony. Out there, things escalated quickly. He touched my chest, and then he made his proposal. He wanted me to spend the weekend with him, promising it would be an unforgettable experience, just one time, and then I'd go back to my life as if nothing had happened. I went back to my husband and told him outright that I'd be leaving for the weekend with this man. She took a shaky breath. My husband just stood there silently, watching as I walked out with him. I was stunned, but I stayed quiet, letting her continue. That weekend changed everything, Carla said, her voice thick with emotion. When I got back, my husband couldn't even look at me. I attempted to convince him that we could get through it, but something had snapped between us. He couldn't get near to me anymore. We drifted away. I began pursuing casual meetings at night, hoping to fill the emptiness as he grew more reclusive. His accounting practice plummeted. He eventually lost his job. I arrived home one night and discovered him in the basement. Her voice trembled slightly. After that, I spent 7 months in a mental treatment facility. My 3 children, 13, 11, and 9 at the time, had stopped speaking to me. Someone must have informed them what I did. My parents ended up suing for custody. Carla peered into a glass, her face a combination of grief and resignation. I lost everything because I let him draw me in. I simply thought you should understand the kind of individual you're dealing with. I didn't fully understand what my kids were doing at the time, but when they were old enough, they filed for emancipation and cut off all contact with me, Carla said, her voice heavy with remorse. Looking at her watch, she added, it took him about 15 minutes to change me. He's been out there for 11 minutes. She then turned to me and said, don't turn around. Do not acknowledge them. Ignore them. If she attempts to speak to you, avoid looking at her. She may suggest she has something essential to tell you. If she does, answer how you like, and we'll depart together. It will unnerve him and maybe give her pause. For the time being, this may be your sole source of pleasure. After that, we'll go someplace to rest and converse. Can you handle that? Be alert. Samantha approached from behind, put her hand on my upper left arm, and said, David, there's something I need to tell you. I shrugged her off and yelled over my shoulder, stay away from me. You are nothing but problems. Say anything you need to, but if you don't come home tonight, don't bother returning. We are finished, and I will make sure you regret it. You have more to lose than I do. With that, I motioned to Carla, and we departed. Samantha, we need to discuss right now. Samantha yelled after me, but I continued going. The mood in the room had eased, and people automatically stood aside as we approached the exit. How did you get here? I asked Carla. Car service, she answered. Allow me, I said, signaling for my vehicle. A valet pulled my Jaguar around to the front, and a young guy opened the door for Carla, who climbed in. After paying him, I slipped into the driver's seat. I know a quiet area where we may discuss. Does this work for you? She asked. That's perfect, David. I could use a drink, she remarked, smiling slightly. We went to the Blue Oyster, a relaxed spot with a mostly older crowd. After parking, we found a secluded table in the back and ordered drinks and appetizers. As she finished sharing the rest of her story, I opened up about Samantha and me. Samantha was a college professor who faced a major career setback when scandalous news surfaced. I also mentioned that I was the executive editor at the New York Times with 6 years in the Air Force Special Operations. So, what are your plans? Carla asked. Plan? I said, shaking my head. I can't even get my brain around my emotions, much alone figure out what to do. If she isn't there when I come home, it's time for extreme action. She'll pay, as will he. I paused, my emotions welling up, my voice broke, and tears began to flow. Carla reached across the table and took my hand, her eyes filled with deep empathy, as if the weight of the world had crumbled for both of us. I looked at her and realized that if I wanted, I could find comfort here, but I couldn't, not if there was even a shred of hope of reconciliation. Look, I'm sorry, but rebound intimacy isn't my thing, I replied softly. I need to go home and confront this. Please submit your contact information so that we can remain in touch. Perhaps we can speak about this. I'll need that guy's name to begin plotting his doom. Carla nodded, grabbed my phone, and typed in her complete name, Laura Mitchell, along with her phone number and address. David, you are a decent guy. You did not deserve this, she added quietly. I hoped for more, but I accept your decision. Go home and try to sort things out. Best of luck. I paid the bill, and we drove away. I dropped her off at her condo, saw her go inside, and drove home, my thoughts racing. When I opened the door, I discovered Samantha was not there. All right, she made her choice, I said. It was 11:39 a.m. when I took up my phone and phoned my closest buddy, Richard Walker, who was also my attorney and had served with me in the Air Force. We frequently joked about how he'd gone on to become a lawyer while I'd obtained a decent job. A drowsy voice replied, "Hello. What's going on, John?" "It's nearly 1 a.m. "Are you okay?" he asked. "No, John, it's not fine," I said firmly. "I need you here at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'll be ready to go into lawyer mode, and maybe even best buddy mode. I'm filing for divorce." That jolted him awake. I could hear his wife in the background wondering what was going on, and John said, "It's Mike. We have a problem." "You attended that event, right? Samantha met Ryan Thompson there, right?" he asked. "Oh man," he moaned. "You had no idea, did you? Just make sure you are here for me, John." "No problem," he said. "I'll be there." After the call, I started making a list. First, I looked up a bonded locksmith and jotted down their contact information. Then, I found a site that buys cars for cash and provided the title. It was clear the Mercedes-Benz I'd bought for our 24th anniversary was in my name, and I noted their details. And finally, I packed 2 small overnight bags with essentials, underwear, clothes, and shoes, and left them by the front door before going to bed. At 7 a.m., I awoke, got coffee, and checked my computer for newsroom updates. I saw Eric White, one of our investigative reporters, was online, so I contacted him and asked him to quietly dig up whatever he could find on Ryan Thompson. "Not a problem, boss," Brian said. "I'll get right on it." Still no sight of my soon-to-be ex-wife. I contacted the auto buyer and indicated I had a Mercedes-Benz for sale with a clean title and legal Illinois registration. "What is the model?" the guy inquired. After I informed him, he suggested a price, a 2-year-old Mercedes-Benz, "How about $2,000? He sounded astonished, maybe even suspicious. "It's not stolen," I told him, "but you'll need to pick it up." After providing him the location, he promised to be there in 25 minutes. "Do not sell it to anybody else." He replied, "I'll be there," and hung up. 10 minutes after I finished speaking with the locksmith, John and his paralegal came, and we went inside, where I offered them coffee and English muffins. About 20 minutes later, Andy from the car service arrived, and I showed him the Mercedes-Benz, as well as the registration and title. "Is there anything wrong with it?" he asked. "No, it's in wonderful condition. I just don't need it anymore," I said. "Divorce?" He guessed, smiled. "I'm glad you're not divorcing me." His crew had a flatbed tow truck ready. I signed all of the paperwork, and Andy paid me before they drove the vehicle away. He shook my hand and wished me well before departing. Still no trace of my unfaithful wife. Back inside, John and his legal team were hard at work in the dining room. They'd finished the divorce papers, produced a restraining order, and begun writing a claim for alienation of love. John looked up and said, "What about the car?" "I sold it," I stated, "and I don't need it anymore." "You didn't do anything illegal," John replied with a chuckle. "A bit sneaky, sure, but I like it." We spent the next 45 minutes talking about money, banks, investment accounts, insurance, mobile phones, mortgages, and my pensions. By midday, my wife hadn't returned, and the locksmith had changed all of the locks and placed keyless deadbolts on every door. We decided to have lunch at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, where John's wife, Rachel Simmons, joined us, and she greeted me with a warm, supportive hug. At the table, Rachel studied me, clearly waiting for me to share what was on my mind. Eventually, she broke the silence, gently asking, "What happened, and what do you plan to do next?" "All I did was trust my wife," I responded, my voice full of passion. "She blindsided me, and now I'm just trying to process it all." Rachel nodded empathetically. "Do you think it can ever be fixed?" "Absolutely not," I said emphatically. "She still hasn't come back, and honestly, I'm lost. The only way out of this mess might be if she just disappeared entirely." Rachel gave me an understanding glance and shook her head slightly. "I can't imagine why Samantha would do this." We spent a long time discussing and analyzing the incident together. After that, we returned home. By 6 p.m., I was back at my home, still alone with no trace of my wife. I was exhausted, so I got a drink and fell asleep in my chair. I awoke the following morning at 7 a.m., sluggish and sore. After hobbling to the shower and washing up, I did something I hadn't done in years. I attended church. Sitting silently in the back pew, I prayed for direction, but it seemed as if my pleas were received with silence. Even after Mass, I waited, looking for a sign. None arrived. It seems that I was on my own in this. I went home, had a coffee at a fast food drive-thru, and parked my Jaguar in the garage next to my 1978 Jeep Wagoneer. With the changing weather, I'd soon be driving the Bronco every day. After closing up the garage, I switched on the television to watch the Bears-Lions game, but the Bears lost as expected. It felt natural considering my recent run of poor luck. Samantha texted me around 5:30 p.m., saying, "On my way, we'll be home in 20 minutes." I gazed at the message, knowing that with the restraining order set to take effect, things were going to become heated. Exactly 20 minutes later, I heard the rumbling of an unusual automobile entering the driveway. Looking out the window, I saw a stylish European automobile. Samantha got out of the passenger seat, leaned into the vehicle, and kissed someone, probably Ryan Thompson, before he drove away. She then stepped up to the home, perplexed that her keys did not work in the new locks. Her gaze shifted to the two little overnight bags resting at the entrance. "What's going on?" she asked herself before ringing the doorbell several times. She began hammering on the door, shouting at me to open it. "David, open the door." Finally, I approached the door. Samantha was angry, gazing at me and demanding an explanation. "It's simple, Samantha," I said quietly. "Your keys don't work because you don't live here anymore. The woman I was married to used to live here, but she's gone now." Her eyes widened and she attempted to kiss me, but I stopped her. "Honey," she began, but I interrupted. "I have no idea where that mouth has been or who it's been on. Tell me, how many times did you sleep with him, or do other things? What we had wasn't just intimacy, it was special." Samantha flinched, stammering. "At least I kept my wedding rings on," she said defensively. "Oh, spare me," I said fiercely. "You disappeared for 2 full days without a single call. I doubt you even thought about me." I looked at her hands. "Speaking of rings, those were gifts, so they're yours. But the engagement ring, that was my grandmother's. Remember when I proposed? You won't be needing it anymore." Her face crumpled as she began to weep and tremble. "Why are you doing this?" she cried angrily. "It was just an experience. I had a right to it. You don't own me." Her confidence seemed to return as she straightened up. "You need to swallow your pride, David. We both need to move on." "You're right," I said. "And I'm already doing it." I gave her an envelope. "This is for you." She opened it, bewildered. "What's this?" she inquired. "Money," I said. "I sold the Mercedes-Benz. I didn't need it anymore." Her face twisted in horror. "What did you do with my car?" she insisted. "It wasn't your car," I said. "I bought it for you, but it was in my name, so I sold it. I thought giving you the money would be a fair gesture." "That's all of it?" she questioned, swiftly counting the cash. "Yes," I said coldly. $222,000. That car was worth way more." "What's going on?" "That's all it was worth," I said plainly. Much like our marriage after Thursday night. Her disbelief was clear on her face as she started to argue. "How could you be so heartless? I came back to you." I couldn't help but notice her naked right hand. "Where's the Princess Diana ring, Samantha? The one you insisted on having. I offered to get you an authentic replica, but you demanded that knockoff. I bought it just to make you happy. Where is it?" Her cheeks became pale as she stuttered. He wanted a memento from our weekend," she said quietly, averting my sight. "So you didn't just give him yourself, you also gave away the ring you claimed to treasure." I was puzzled. She flushed deeply and nodded slightly. I checked my watch, 6:03 p.m. "Get out, Samantha. We are done." "No. I want to come inside." "This is my home," she insisted. "Not anymore," I muttered, shutting the door and latching it. Leaning against the massive wood, tears welled up in my eyes as the anguish hit me. Outside, she kept ringing the doorbell, knocking on the door, and yelling at me to allow her in. I took out my phone and phoned 911. "What's your emergency?" Police, fire, or medical? The dispatcher inquired. I have a restraining order against my soon-to-be ex-wife. She's outside yelling and causing a disturbance. Please send someone quickly. Moments later, I saw 2 police vehicles come into the driveway, lights blazing. 4 cops approached Samantha, and 2 came to my door. I delivered them a copy of the restraining order, which they confirmed with the station, and gave her a copy, suggesting that they handle the problem peacefully. Meanwhile, Samantha was made aware of the restraining order. As the cops talked to her, she yelled back at me. Where am I supposed to go? She exclaimed. Go to hell, Samantha. I couldn't care less, I said, my voice firm. The cops directed her to leave and took her and her things to the curb. She phoned an Uber and apologized profusely to the authorities before instructing the driver to take her to the Peninsula Hotel. Samantha came to Lexington Publishing's 10th floor offices. Jessica Adams, her executive assistant, was already waiting for her, visibly apprehensive. You're 30 minutes late, Amanda stated as she entered the office. Samantha groaned and placed her luggage down. What's going on? She inquired. Amanda paused, then shouted, Is it true? Samantha froze, her thoughts whirling. What are you talking about? Amanda's voice lowered to a whisper. Everyone's talking about you and David and the gala Thursday night. Samantha slipped into her chair, feeling tense. Yes, we went to the gala, but I'm not sure what you mean. Amanda glanced at her with surprise. You left with that guy, the creep, and left David there. Oh my God. Samantha gazed at Amanda, taken aback by her friend's response. She remained mute, taken aback by the gravity of the situation. Everyone knows, you fool. It's all over the company and it's not even 11 a.m. yet, Amanda said. Samantha's face became pale as the weight of the discovery struck her. Just then, her employer, Rachel Howard, came into the room, her face filled with horror and bewilderment. Oh my goodness, it's true, Natalie cried, glancing between the 2 ladies. Samantha froze, her thoughts whirling. Everything was getting out of hand. Samantha stated defensively, I think this is being blown way out of proportion. Oh really? Natalie said with a smile. Do you even know who he is? How do you think the whole city, and maybe half the Midwest, already knows? Samantha became pale and stared at her hands. What did David tell you? She inquired calmly. He said we overclaimed, and he'd ruin you like you ruined him, Natalie stated angrily. Samantha's eyes widened. Who does he think he is? He's your husband, you fool, Natalie said. What did David do when you got back on Saturday? Samantha sniffled, her cheeks flushed with emotion. He sold my car, she mumbled. Said he didn't need it anymore since he didn't have a wife to drive it. Oh my goodness, Natalie said, shaking her head in astonishment. At that moment, the door shot open and Stephanie Cooper, Chemical Bank's Vice President of Mortgages and Acquisitions, rushed in, closely followed by Samantha's assistant, Lindsay Parker. I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper, Kendra said, short of breath. She just walked in. It's all right, Kendra, Samantha responded with a sarcastic tone. Come on in, Steph. Victoria rushed in and glared at Samantha. What on earth have you done? Before Samantha could react, Natalie's phone rang. She grabbed it up. Hello. Yes, James, I'm with her now. No, we haven't heard anything from him yet. I'm just getting the details. Yes, dear, I'll let you know as soon as I find out. Goodbye. She shut up the phone and turned to Samantha. That was my husband. He wants to know if you've heard from David today. No, I haven't spoken to him since last night, Samantha said, obviously shaking. She picked up her phone and phoned David's number. The phone beeped twice before a recorded message read, Your service has been disconnected. She looked at the instrument as if it were poisonous. He cut off my phone, she mumbled. Natalie breathed heavily. Oh, this is bad. Very bad. Just then, Kendra returned to the room. A young woman is urgently requesting to see you, she told you. It's about your marriage. An uneasy quiet enveloped the room. Send her in, Samantha murmured, grudgingly. A tall blonde lady wearing a blue skirt, ivory top, 3-inch heels, and matching jacket entered the workplace with a little briefcase. She approached Samantha's desk, scanning the room before focusing her attention on her. "Are you Mrs. Emily Carter, at least for now?" the lady said. Victoria said sharply, "Listen here, lady, who do you think?" "Yes, I'm David Harper's wife," Samantha interjected, cutting her off. "Do you have something for me?" she said, fearing the response. "Congratulations, Mrs. Harper. You've been served," the lady said, giving her a huge envelope. She took a short snapshot as evidence and turned to go. She hesitated at the door and glanced back. "7 years ago, my mother tore our family apart just like you did," she told me. "I hope it was worth it. Good day." Samantha lowered her head to the desk, grasping the envelope firmly as tears flowed down her cheeks. Victoria ran over to assist her sit up as she started to hyperventilate. Meanwhile, Natalie took out her phone and phoned a number. New York American Globe. "Mr. Harper's office. How may I assist you?" a professional voice said. "I need to speak with Mr. Harper." "This is Stephanie Cooper from Chemical Bank," Victoria replied curtly. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "It's about his wife," Victoria said coldly. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Harper isn't accepting calls from his wife," the assistant remarked. "Just put him on the phone," Victoria yelled. "One moment, please." A few seconds later, David's voice emerged over the speaker. "Well, Victoria, I assume the whole crowd is gathered around Samantha." "Let me guess, Amanda and Natalie are there too, along with the Queen of Fidelity herself," David stated with an unpleasant voice. "What do you want?" "This is extreme, David. She's in pieces and you're not helping. What's your plan here?" Victoria was nervous. Ask her what she expected to happen when she left for a special weekend, then tell her to get a lawyer and talk to them. "I won't speak to her until we sit down with the kids on Saturday. Goodbye." A decisive click marked the end of the line. "Oh no," Victoria said softly, her face blanched. "You're in serious trouble." "Well," responded Victoria, "dry, your only option is to lay it all out and beg for mercy." "Oh wait, you already did that this weekend, didn't you?" Samantha's head struck her desk with a dull thump, reverberating throughout the office. Nobody moved to aid her. Meanwhile, David concluded the conversation with Victoria and called his son, Ethan, in New Jersey. Ethan was in a serious relationship, and David could only hope that this circumstance would not disrupt it. But the family needed to communicate. After 3 rings, Ethan responded. "Hey, Dad. What's up?" "Not great, son. How's Maya?" "She's good, Dad." "What's going on? Is Mom okay?" "She's physically fine," David said. "But I need you and Olivia here for a family meeting on Saturday. Maya's welcome to come too. 2 tickets will be waiting for you at the counter on Thursday. Janine will send you the details. Don't ask questions, just be here. It's important." "Dad, you're really scaring me." "What's going on?" "Son, I haven't spoken to you like this in over 9 years, but I need you to trust me now. Just come." "Don't ask questions," David said him. He hung up, opting not to attempt to influence his children's attitudes about their mother. He would let them to form their own conclusions. His chat with Olivia was similar, albeit she seemed more impassioned. Despite this, she has agreed to see him on Saturday. The remainder of David's day went quite calmly. He visited his lawyer and kept his private investigator up to speed on any developments involving Ryan Thompson. Samantha's friends gathered around her at Lexington Publishing, where she sat overwhelmed and crying hysterically. "What have I done? What have I done?" Samantha sobbed, unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation. Natalie finally stepped up. "We need to band together and find a way to make things right." She took out her phone and called. "Hey, Lila, it's Natalie. Can you take on a friend of mine for a divorce case? Her name is Emily Carter." Natalie paused to listen to the reaction. "Yes, her husband's name is David Harper." "Wait, what? I see. Thanks anyway," she said, hanging up the phone and turning to face the gathering. "What was that about?" "She's already being seen as toxic," Victoria said, her voice husky. "That was Vanessa Gomez. She's a tough lawyer, no sympathy for bad husbands or cheating spouses." But when she heard Samantha's name, she immediately declined. She said if she took the case, her own husband would divorce her. They are devout Catholics with 5 kids and they know David and Samantha. Plus, she's already heard about Jason. Victoria stood up. "Let me give it a shot," she said. She phoned a number from her mobile phone. "Hi, this is Stephanie Cooper. May I speak to Logan Hayes?" Victoria talked briefly on the phone before her face collapsed. "Oh, you've already heard. Well, thanks anyway," she moaned and turned to face Samantha. "No luck, honey. I'm running out of options. He's already heard about what happened and said frankly, you brought this on yourself. He also mentioned he wouldn't go up against Richard Walker on this case for anything." Saturday morning dawned bright and cool, as is typical for New York this time of year. At 9 a.m., the children sat in the living room with coffee, waiting for their mother to come. Samantha eventually entered, escorted by Brooke Anderson, her lawyer. "Really, Samantha? Bringing your lawyer here in front of the kids?" David said, surprised. "My client doesn't want her character attacked in front of her children," Megan said forcefully. "Your call." David slumped back in his chair. The kids rushed over to their mom, full of questions. "No questions for my client," Megan said curtly. "What? Who is this?" Olivia inquired, puzzled. "I'm Miss Emily Carter's attorney," Megan said. "Your father is filing for divorce," Megan said, her voice firm. The truth was out. David remained silent, following Richard Walker's counsel to either reveal the truth or say nothing at all. Looking back, it was sound counsel. David's son Ethan spoke first. "What's going on, Mom?" "Please direct all questions to me," Megan said. Olivia said, "Mom, what's happening?" "You can talk to me, young lady," Megan said coolly. "I'm your mother's spokesperson." That's when Ethan's fiancée, Maya, snapped. "Shut up, lady," she said harshly. Megan was astonished. "And who are you?" she inquired, her tone strained. "Isabella Martinez." "Daniel Reed's fiancée," Maya replied confidently. "That makes me family, more than I can say for you." Things quickly got quite fascinating. Apparently, Ethan's mother had not been informed about the engagement. Even David didn't know how severe the situation was until he glimpsed the diamond shining on Maya's left hand. David smiled as he stepped up and embraced his future daughter-in-law. He then turned to shake his son's hand. "Congrats, son," David responded cheerfully. Ethan smiled back. "Watch it, old man. You know she's taken," he said. Samantha, however, was absolutely astonished. "Oh, my baby," she said, her voice shaking. "Sorry, Mom, but you'll need to speak with your attorney," Ethan said firmly. Samantha was clearly distraught, holding back tears, when Megan unexpectedly said, "I think we are done here." She stood as if ready to go and moved toward the door. That was the last straw for David. "Sit down, Miss Callahan," he said firmly. "This is a family meeting. You knew that when you came, and yet you still brought a lawyer. You can either stay quiet or leave. Either way, Samantha's kids and I need to talk to her." The audience grew quiet, and Megan unwillingly returned to her seat, apparently embarrassed. "Other than today, I haven't told our kids anything yet," David warned Megan. Samantha finally got to speak. "Your father wants a divorce," she said gently. Ethan gazed at her with a harsh face. "Why, Mom?" he inquired. Samantha moved aside, her words scarcely audible. "I don't know." David took a deep breath and maintained his calm. "Really, Samantha, this is how you're handling it?" questioned the guy. She began crying and barely managed to say, "Your turn." David smiled and started, "Fine. Your mother and I went to a children's charity gala last Thursday. She ended up mingling with a man who offered her a weekend of so-called excitement, promising her experiences she'd never forget. This happened right on the ballroom balcony. Women who'd been targeted by him warned me about his intentions, but they left together. She told me she was going home with him for the weekend." David stopped, his voice calm. "I feel terrible for not stepping in. She's an adult and she can make her own choices, but I regret not standing up to him. I could have caused a scene, but I didn't. I feel ashamed and embarrassed." Your mother, however, went ahead with her choice, just as everyone predicted. He kept going. I didn't hear from her until Saturday afternoon around 4:45 when she texted that she was on her way home. She got back around 5:25 and he dropped her off. She walked up like nothing happened, but her keys didn't work because I changed the locks. I didn't want to risk her bringing him into our home. Samantha interjected, "You sold my car." David shakes his head. I already explained it was my car. I bought it. It was in my name. I gave you the money from the sale. I didn't just give it away like you gave yourself away. Samantha began to break apart, her mascara and eyeliner blurring as tears flowed down her cheeks. But you know what hurt the most? David said, his voice full of passion. She wore the diamond necklace I gave her for our 24th anniversary and her Christmas sapphire earrings to the event. When she came home, she still had those on, along with her wedding and engagement rings, which I took back because we are no longer married. The engagement ring was my grandmother's. But you know what was missing? The one piece of jewelry she said meant the most to her. The one she loved, even if it was a cheap replica. The one I promised to replace. David hesitated. The ring she always wore, the Lady Di's ring. She lost it. Yeah, Lady Di's ring, David said. She lost it, and you know why. Samantha wailed, quivering, "Please, David, stop, please." I wanted a keepsake, David said, his voice quivering with rage. She gave it away, just like she gave herself away. David's children clutched to one another, startled into silence as Samantha proceeded to break down in front of them. I spent the weekend and the whole week sorting things out, David said with pride. I cried a lot. That's why there's nothing left now. Olivia's words cut through the quiet. Daddy, can't you forgive her for one mistake? Ethan responded, Yeah, Dad, it was just one time. Mom deserves better from you. Move on. David was shaken. Had he lost his opportunity to face this head on? Was he the only one experiencing pain? Was it all his fault? Did his children comprehend what was happening? Are you even listening to what we're discussing? He fumed. Do you know what she did? Let's go over it again. Tell me, Samantha, did you have an inappropriate conversation with a man who wasn't your husband last Thursday night? Samantha hesitated. I talked to a nice guy, she murmured. Another opportunity missed, David mumbled, his tone level. Answer the question. Samantha eventually said, Well, I suppose I might have. David's irritation was growing. Did he tell you to inform your husband that you were going home with him for the night? She glanced away. Yes, she said gently. And what did you do all weekend? David said, attempting to suppress his emotions. Did you play games, recite poetry, write letters to the kids? Did you even think to call your husband? Samantha's sharpness increased. Nothing but a hoe. David interrupted her, his voice cool. I wanted it, so I did it, she confessed, her frank honesty striking David hard. David took a big breath. No, Samantha. I'll have you questioned under oath about that weekend. Everyone will know if they don't already. Samantha started to collapse, and who was the lady who had served her papers? She was truly a lawyer. She offered since her family had been through something similar. This is why she became an attorney. Samantha suddenly understood the enormity of the issue. Her confidence was gone, and she broke down in front of David and their 3 children. I'll sign everything and give it to Jonathan today, she added, sobbing. Megan interjected, shaking her head. I don't think that's in your best interest. You're fired, David said firmly. Megan, send your invoice to my office. I'll handle it. David felt a surge of exhilaration, like if he had just hit a home run into center field at Brentwood Green. Samantha rose up and moved toward the door, looking back at David. Goodbye, David. Kids, I'll call you tomorrow and we'll meet up. The door snapped closed behind her. Brooke Anderson remained behind. Well, she inquired coldly. I hope you're happy. She's devastated, Megan remarked. Get out of my house, you witch. David said. Megan huffed, turned, and departed. Then the reaction occurred. Dad, how could you be so harsh to Mom? You treated her like that?" Olivia said, her voice full of shock. "What's wrong with you, Dad?" Ethan inquired. "Are you seriously divorcing Mom over this?" David took a deep breath and reflected about himself. "I'm glad I sent both of them to college. Do you think I should just accept this?" he said, looking to Maya. "Is this what you both expect in your marriages?" Maya gasped and stared at him. "I'd never do anything like that, Dad. It's wrong from every angle. Surely, Dad, you're not actually going through with this?" Ethan said, his rage boiling. "Mike, it's decided," David said, his voice steely. "And if you can't support me on this, don't bother coming to any future events." He maintained his eyes as Ethan's rage matched his own. Olivia, still unhappy, joined in. "Dad, why were you so mean? Mom was so upset when she left. She's really hurting. You should forgive her and take her back." David was astonished. Regardless of what happened, his children supported her. Maya finally spoke out, and her voice was clear. "Dad, this might bother Ethan, but you're right. Mom didn't even acknowledge what she did wrong or apologize. Not that it would change anything, but at least some remorse would have been the decent thing." The atmosphere in the room was tense. About 2 hours later, the children phoned their mother and scheduled a visit with her. David gave Ethan a backup key and advised him to drive cautiously. Ethan glanced at him and said, "Do you want to come along?" "Are you kidding me?" David said, his voice rising. Ethan gazed at him, stating he couldn't understand him. Meanwhile, David stepped up his efforts against Ryan Thompson, and his associates seemed to be having fun while taking action. One of their measures was to change Jason's license plate and then report his automobile stolen anonymously. David was amazed with how readily they could access his automobiles, despite the fact that he kept both his Porsche and Jaguar in a garage. They also followed Jason around the Dan Ryan Expressway, using an ingenious technique to alter the car's computer. They delayed traffic and boxed him into the center lane, driving his Porsche into the barrier as he attempted to depart, inflicting extensive damage and putting him in the hospital for 9 days. His insurance price increased dramatically, and he lost his old coverage. The man appeared to have the worst luck conceivable. When the police arrived, they did not seem eager to investigate. They were aware of his notoriety and ignored his problems, most likely believing that an enraged spouse was exacting his retribution. That evening, Richard Walker phoned to inform David that Samantha had delivered the legal paperwork herself. He had a good judge lined up. The judge's son had been a victim of Ryan Thompson 4 years before, and the judge informed David that he would expedite both the divorce and the alienation of love action. It was unclear how far they could go with the adultery charge, but it was worthwhile to try. Following the first argument, the children became aloof, with only Maya supporting David's choice. They returned to school about a week later, and the divorce proceedings continued. When the final decision arrived, David felt a sense of relief, just in time for the Cancer Society Gala. He knew Jason would be there, and he was dying for some retribution. At a coffee shop, one of David's buddies had a brilliant idea that he had to pursue. He contacted Carla and inquired whether she planned to attend the event. She indicated that she had been invited but had not made a decision yet. David invited her to come. It would be worthwhile to see the entertainment he had planned. They arrived at the gathering and mingled, recognizing Samantha and her pals Natalie and Victoria. She tried to talk to Jason, but he was preoccupied with a small blonde in a green outfit. Meanwhile, his 2 colleagues kept her husband distracted as he made his move on her. He took her into a separate room, closing the door behind them. David contacted the spouse and offered to assist provided he trusted him and followed his guidance. Carla conveyed the scenario to the spouse, who seemed worried. She told him that causing a commotion may get him injured, but if he remained cool, they'd still leave together, albeit a little humiliated. He paused a minute, looked at the thugs, and grudgingly consented. David offered to link him with individuals who might help him and recommended that he could humiliate his wife sufficiently to earn an apology. The spouse went along with the idea. David and Carla followed them out of the private area, with the wife leading the way. They paused to get their jackets while the guys arranged for their Jaguar to be brought around. David and Carla departed just as they were settling into the back seat, with the husband bringing his wife close and kissing her. After they shut the door, the second goon went into the front passenger seat. The spouse was nervous, but David encouraged him to wait. His friend's plan included 2 accomplices who worked at a car detailing company. They had offered him a discount ticket for an inside cleaning and a free vehicle wash. While washing the automobile, they placed 3 smoke bombs with an electrical detonation, each emitting a skunk-like stench. As the car's brake lights flashed and it continued to go ahead, it came to a halt some 9 feet later, colliding with a cab on the front right side. The doors burst open and 4 individuals scrambled out, choking and gagging, as smoke poured from the automobile. The blonde's dress fell down, exposing her underwear to anyone who passed by. Her spouse raced to her side, but he was wobbly due to the scent and smoke. David grinned as the jerk fought to get up, limping on his damaged leg. Just then, the cops came. As the jerk approached his former sweetheart, her husband intervened, punching his stomach and kicking his crotch. He went down. The husband swiftly took his wife away, disregarding the lingering skunk odor and scolding her as they departed. David turned to Carla and said, "Score 1 for the good guys." David had handed the husband his business card and instructed him to phone him the next day if he needed anything. He then phoned a speed dial number from his phone. "Hello," a voice responded. "Great job," David said. "Thanks," the voice said, as David terminated the conversation. After handing the husband his card and urging him to call if he needed anything, David and Carla went to her home, where things swiftly escalated. They ended themselves in her bedroom, seeking a deeper connection. David had not remained celibate since his divorce, but this seemed like a new level of closeness. Carla pulled him down in bed and concentrated all of her efforts on him, nibbling away and leaving scars. She climaxed dramatically, calling out her late husband's name as she did so. It was a raw moment, with her emotions running high. She slumped in tears but immediately calmed herself and apologized for her outburst. David comforted her, acknowledging her suffering. They spoke, realizing the severity of the situation. David wasn't sure how he felt about her, but there was obviously a connection. After resting, he washed, dressed, and kissed her before departing. Carla questioned whether she would be all right, and David promised to call in the coming months. They became closer as family affairs unfolded. David's son married, and despite everything, they brought his mother, trusting David to handle the issue. He promised to go, but he didn't. Maya's family was unaware of the complete story and were dissatisfied when Maya's mother informed them. Her father was upset, and the Italian side of the family severed relations with Samantha. Maya's grandma even spit in Samantha's face. Things became heated when one of Samantha's pals hit on Maya, generating a scene. Samantha broke down and left the reception. David gave Maya a lovely message and a check, and he penned a letter to her parents explaining why he couldn't be with Samantha. He also wrote a frank email to his kid. The wedding went place, and a year later, his son and daughter-in-law received a newborn boy called David Adrian Hayes in honor of his father and grandparents. Maya invited David to the baptism, which made him very happy. He traveled there, rented a hotel room, and attended the church service. Meeting his grandchild, his namesake, was a wonderful delight. But when he saw Samantha arriving with someone, he almost lost control. She approached him, and he looked at his kid, wondering whether she was actually here. Maya softly begged with him to remain calm. "Just this once," she said. "Sorry, honey," David murmured, giving her an envelope and departing. Back at the hotel, he checked out, went to the airport, took a flight back, and returned home. Afterward, he almost had to change his phone number. Childish? Maybe. But that's how things went. David eventually got a position with the Justice Department in New York. When he phoned to congratulate him and Maya and inquire about their grandchild, he heard her voice in the background. "Who's on the phone?" she inquired from a distance. David hung up and turned off his phone. Following that, he largely stayed to himself. The only person he spoke with on a regular basis was Carla, who had become a close friend and confidant. His stealthy campaign against Ryan Thompson was still ongoing. Jason was attempting to discover out who was behind it, but he wasn't successful. Even David's kid and Maya were aware of the situation. It was trivial stuff, but it had become something of a legend. Approximately 3 months later, Maya phoned David at work. "Dad, next Saturday is little David's 3rd birthday. We are throwing a party, and we want you there." "I'd love to, sweetheart, but you know how I feel," he responded. I don't want to ruin it. Mom's not invited, Maya said firmly. I told Thomas, your son, that she's not welcome that day. If he invites her, I'll cut him off. David couldn't stop admiring his daughter-in-law. I'd be honored to come, he said. He received the information and cleared his schedule for the day. He phoned Toys R Us and purchased a dump truck similar to the one he had as a youngster. They wrapped it up and delivered it to his workplace. He recalls receiving one for his kid, Thomas, for Christmas and how much he enjoyed it. There are no electronics, just metal and rubber wheels. They were always popular, particularly with grandfathers. David came at 9 a.m. on Saturday. They had a great time, lunch, cake, coffee, and gifts. David talked with Maya's parents, who stated they understood why their daughter admired him so much. Maya's father adored the dump truck. Reminds me of the one I had as a kid. Great choice, Mike. David liked him. Little David ran around the backyard with the truck until he became weary. His mother and grandmother brought him in for a sleep. Even David's kid was polite. He offered David a drink and advised that he rest in the backyard. David heeded his advice, sat in a lawn chair, and drank his drink. Then a darkness descended over him. He glanced up to see his ex-wife holding what seemed to be a glass of white wine. Hello, David. Mind if I join you? David gave her a glance but did not answer. She laid her enormous shoulder bag down and sat, crossing her ankles, a stance she previously employed to entice him. Not this time. His look made her noticeably uncomfortable. You're not making this easy, are you? She said. Anyway, she went on, David said you'd be here, and his wife made it clear I wasn't invited. He may not be thrilled about it, but he thought it was worth trying to patch things up between us. David groaned, finished his drink, and stood up. What's your answer? She inquired. Not just no, David answered, his voice hard, but hell no. Samantha, I've been going through hell these past 3.5 years because of you. It may have been harsh, but it was satisfying to utter. He turned to go away, up to the terrace. He slipped through the sliding glass doors into the kitchen and ran into his kid, who was smiling at him. So, how'd it go, Dad? Thomas said. Not too rough, right? Just thereafter, a gunshot rang out, followed by screaming as diners fled outdoors. David grasped his son's arm. Your mother may be hurt. Go check on her. Ethan became pale and raced outdoors. David got a water bottle, went into the living room, and sat alone on the sofa. The cops came soon after to take statements. A 4-tool can do serious damage, David said when one of the cops questioned him. He said that he hadn't communicated with Samantha in years. As the inquiry progressed, David consoled his daughter-in-law, Maya, who was crying. Then he departed for home. Carla phoned him after hearing the news. Don't worry, I'm managing, David informed her. I don't need help, but thanks for the offer. On Monday, David phoned Adam Foster, a well-known crime photographer in New York who has won several awards. Do I need a favor? David inquired. Sorry to hear about your ex, Ben remarked, sympathetically. Even if you two weren't close. Yeah, most people have heard about it, David said. I need photos of her skull and head color. 10 by 12 would be ideal. Ben gave David an inquisitive glance. That's an unusual one, but I think I can pull it off. I know some people who owe me one. Might be a bit strange though. Thanks, Ben. So you, David said. He knew Ben would come through. It was just a matter of time until the images helped him go forward with his plan. The 3-day wake took place at an upmarket funeral home on the west side. Her coffin stayed closed owing to her looks, although she had a vast circle of friends, hundreds of whom attended. David wasn't present. David's absence was noted as word spread. The day of her burial was chilly, dark, and rainy, leaving David feeling uncomfortable and wet as he watched from a distance through the mist. He watched as they brought the casket to the grave. Despite the dismal weather, a huge audience gathered, and the priest talked sweetly of Samantha, leaving David wondering who he was describing. He was astonished the priest consented to speak, considering the circumstances of her death. David spotted his kid scouring the surroundings, perhaps looking for him. After the ceremony, people started to depart, until only close friends and family remained. As the gathering decreased, only David's children remained. They proceeded to the limousines and his kids stood at the rear door of the Jaguar, looking around one final time. When he didn't see David, he climbed inside and the vehicle gently drove away, disappearing into the mist. David walked out from behind the woods just as the groundskeepers were about to close the grave. He approached her casket, momentarily contemplating a little act of disobedience, but his rage and bitterness had subsided. It had mysteriously vanished. He sighed as he looked down at the lady he had loved before. "I forgive you, even if you never realized your mistakes," David said. "I forgive you. I used to love you, but not anymore." When David returned to work the following day, he discovered a huge envelope on his desk. He hesitated, knowing what was inside, but soon found the nerve to open it. The photograph was not attractive, but it was of her. With the impending Children's Society fundraiser commemorating the 4th anniversary of all that had happened, David phoned Carla and offered her to accompany him. She excitedly agreed, and they planned for him to pick her up at 8 p.m. David then called the Society's editor, investigative reporter, and photographer to his office for a strategy meeting. When everyone came, he described his strategy. "Next weekend, I want that expose on Ryan Thompson published," he told me. "There will be no speculation, only verified, factual, legally supported accounts, backed by depositions and sworn statements." There were nods of approval. "We should have enough solid evidence to bring him down," David said. "I want photographers at the event to capture everything, and then we'll interview the organizers to tally up the proceeds. Can we make this happen?" "I don't see any issues, boss. We'll be ready to publish by midnight Thursday, with room for any new photos," the editor said. "Thank you, everyone," David stated before exiting the meeting. 1 week later, David accompanied Carla to the children's charity event. After checking their outerwear, they interacted with their pals. Ryan Thompson was stalking among the throng, like a predator, looking for his next prey. It didn't take long for him to focus on a lovely brunette with long hair whose spouse had just walked away to the bar. Her champagne glass was almost empty. Jason approached her and whispered something into her ear. She smiled, flushing slightly, and moved in closer as he stroked her arm and shoulder, making her tremble. David observed one of his henchmen position themselves near the balcony doors, while the other approached her spouse. The spouse turned and gave Jason a demanding look, but Jason refused to stop. He continued moving ahead. David turned to Carla. "Now," he said. Carla got closer to the second henchman. Jason murmured to the lady again, grabbed her arm, and started guiding her to the balcony. She smirked, obviously loving the attention. David stepped between them. "Excuse me," he began, drawing the woman's attention. "You don't know me, but this man made similar advances toward my wife about 4.5 years ago, and she gave in and spent the weekend with him, destroying our marriage and leading to this," David said, showing her a picture of Samantha's battered face. "This is my wife," he said. He put the photograph in her hands. "This is your chance to avoid making the same mistake." David carefully motioned to the photographers close as one of Jason's goons approached him. The lady stared at the picture before turning to Jason. "You jerk," she said, striking him across the face. Her claws raked his flesh as his security approached, but Carla intervened gently and held him back. David moved away, brushing past Jason with his right shoulder. Jason scowled at him. "It's you," he hissed, grabbing David's shoulder. "Let go of me," David hissed. Spinning to his left and then rotating back, he delivered a powerful blow to Jason's nose with his right hand. Jason's nose caved, his jaw shattered, and blood spilled forth as he collapsed to the ground like a bag of bricks. His henchmen stayed still as cameras flashed all around them. Carla grabbed David's arm, and the shivering brunette's husband sprang to her side. "Please take me home now," she said, her voice shaking. "Of course," David said, guiding her away. David and Carla entered the dance floor, and the throng parted as they approached the middle. David pointed straight at Jason. "I should feel ashamed for what that man got away with," he said. "You should all feel ashamed for supporting him by donating here. The charity, New York, and society as a whole need to be accountable for his actions. This weekend, a newspaper article will reveal the facts and the courageous statements of his victims. Read it and let it sink in. Carla drew David away before he lost control. They made their way through the mob and returned home. Carla called his wounded fist and they had a beautiful night together. Jason suffered serious repercussions as a result of David's activities. While his actions were not unlawful, public opinion was harsh. He became a pariah, with organizations refusing his gifts and the children's gala seeing a 65% decline. Several organizations have refunded his money, dismissed him from their boards, or publicly censured him. His tarnished reputation as a stockbroker resulted in the loss of both his license and his employment. Jason sought to sue David and have him jailed, but the husband of the lady he was targeting, an assistant district attorney, initiated his own investigation, making the complaint ineffective. Jason, 2 weeks after being dismissed, was discovered horrifically mauled in an alley near the old stockyards. His genitals had been removed and inserted into his mouth. It was a bleak finale for a guy who had destroyed so many lives. David and Carla began a relationship, but they were not sure about marriage. Reconnecting with his children and developing ties with hers has been both tough and gratifying. They are navigating these problems together, doing all they can to build a brighter future. Thanks for watching. Do you think David's decision was justified? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe.